So what's going to be the deeper dive? Well, we're going to explain a little bit more of what's going on here with chord structure. And it's because it's very important, like I said, and I've said this 1,000 times in my videos, it's very important for you to understand what you're playing, but it's equally as important to understand why you're playing what you're playing. That is, without this knowledge, then you're just playing things for the sake of argument. But you don't know if you're playing in the right key, or you don't know, well, if I'm using this key, can I switch over to this key and will it all work? How do I know? Well, that's where all this information comes in, these deeper dives. They're going to be the information. They're going to be the behind the scenes of what's going on, per se. So on that note, let's get started. So we started this off, as you recall from the last video, with an A major. Then we did the A minor. Well, when we're playing things right here with this A shape, okay, this pretty much lays out exactly perfectly, there's no other way to say it, for moving chords around. What do I mean by that? Well, if we play these three right here, this is an A major, and this gives us our three ingredients to make an A, which is a root, a third, and a fifth. Now, this actually would be called an inversion if we're playing just these three. What is an inversion? An inversion is where you take a note, and we'll use A major, which is A, C sharp, and E. Those three notes make an A major. But we can play it C sharp, E, and A. That's called an inversion. It's the same three notes, which means it's the same exact chord. We're just playing the notes in different positions. And that's what we're playing here. Theoretically, well, not theoretically, this is an inversion. If we play just these three strings, if we play string 2, 3, and 4, that gives us everything we need to play an A major. Well, what we have here, this right here on the fourth, that's actually our E. That's our fifth. Right here, string number 3, that is our root. That's our A. And then right here on string number 2, that is our third. So that gives us A, C sharp, E. But it doesn't matter what order we have those three notes. We can put them in any order we want. As long as we have those three notes and we're playing in the key of A, that is always an A major. Doesn't matter how we play it. Now, if we wanted to play this same thing, we're going to jump past our fifth fret here a little bit like we did in the last lesson. Now, if we were looking at this like we were looking at a piano keyboard, and we wanted to play them in order, A, C sharp, E, well, we could do that very easily also by playing it right here. Now, this is exactly how you would play it on a piano if you're playing A, C sharp, E, with root, third, and fifth. This is also an A major. And if you remember from the last video, I said you can play these all over the neck. As long as there are these three notes played in the key of A, this is always an A major. Well, why do I say that? Well, because you can take any three notes, depending on the key they're in, and you can make them any chord that they would be for that key. And what I mean by that is if we take this A, C, E, or A, C sharp, E, I'm sorry. Now, if we play it here, we have a C sharp, then we play the A, then we play the E, we could actually make this a derivative of a C sharp chord. It would be, a fifth or diminished or whatever have you, depending on what the key is that we're playing the C sharp in. Not to get this confusing, but you can take any three notes and turn them into a different chord depending on the key that you're playing. And if you don't understand what I mean by that, then you need to go back to YouTube and watch my video on the 12 keys. That is a critical thing to understand. And once you understand the 12 keys, then you understand what I'm talking about here. But more on that in a minute. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there to get that in everybody's head. But we can play an A major right here. A major. So this would actually be a root position because we're playing root, third, fifth in order. This would actually be an inversion because we're playing fifth, root, third. but they're the same three notes, which makes an A major because we're playing in the key of A major. So, like I said, to make the minor, we just lower the third down a half step. And this makes A minor. But there again, this is an inversion of A minor because of the order the notes lay out. So if we take our A major here, which lays out root, third, fifth, like you would play on a piano, and we lower our third down a half step, and we play this, now we're playing an A minor. A minor. A minor. Now, if you listen, they're the same notes, but the timbre is a little different because we're playing it up higher on the neck. But if you listen, the chord's the same. Okay, now here I'm barring off this A. I'm adding in another root right here by barring off this fifth fret, this first string. This is an A. So that's an A minor. And if I play this E open here, that's an A minor. All right, so now let's add this right here, this A in this fifth string. A minor. A minor. A major. And you can hear that tonal shift from the major third to the minor third. Here's the major. Here's the minor. Here's the major. Here's the minor. You can hear that shift. Same exact notes. The timbre is different because we're playing it on different strings. You hear this one's just a little thinner on the second string, and on the third string it's a little thicker. Just changing the timbre, but the notes are the same. All the notes are the same. So they're all still A's. And like I said, all we're doing is playing an inversion of this chord. Now, not everything you play is going to be that simple, 3 strings. If you're playing any chord, it doesn't matter what chord it is, you can play it with these 3 strings, the second, third, and fourth string. Those 3. This is an A major. This is an A sharp major. This is a B major. C major. C sharp major. D major. And all we're doing is moving these same 3 fingers in these 3 notes up the fretboard. But something you have to understand is you have to understand how the major scale, like I said, if you haven't watched my video on the major scale back on YouTube, you need to watch that because that's going to start to explain to you the sharps and the flats because it's imperative you understand that. And it's imperative to understand that because you need to know, well, when is it a sharp or when is it a flat? Because an F sharp and a G flat are the same exact note. Okay, so why is one an F sharp, why is one a G flat? Because it depends on the key that it is in. And that will denote it being either sharp or flat, being in the key, whichever the key is. So, like I said, when we do this A major right here, we're on second strings 2, 3, and 4. When we go up a half step to A sharp, that's also B flat. It can go either way you want to look at it. Then we go to B, we go to C. When we go to C sharp, here's D, here's D flat. C sharp, D flat. And what denotes that, either being C sharp or D flat, is the key signature that that chord happens to be in at the time. And that will make it either sharp or flat. That'll make it either C sharp or D flat. And like I said, if you haven't seen the one about the keys, you need to go back and watch that, because that is imperative to understanding what we're doing here. Now, taking us a little step further, something we're going to go ahead and jump into here. And I'll probably cover this again on a YouTube video, but we need to go ahead and get this started, because I want this channel will always get this type of information first, as opposed just to regular YouTube videos. So we're going to start right here on E. And we're going to talk about these notes right now, because this is something you must learn. So if our E here is open, and you understand the major scale, we got open, F is 6-1. F sharp is 6-2. G is 6-3. G sharp is 6-4. A is 6-5, which also happens to be the same exact note as the one underneath it. So when we get to here on the 6th string, to this A, well, we're back to A here. So normally when we're doing stuff like this, we'll go 1 through 4. We're actually open, 2, 4. So when we get to 5, a lot of these notes start overlaying each other. So let me show you what I mean. So we're going to go E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, or B flat, depending on the key, but we're going to stay with sharps. A sharp, B, C, C sharp. Now we get here to this D, the one below it is also D. So we have D, D sharp, E, E sharp, or E flat, depending on the key, F. Now when we get here, when we get to the G, the one below it is also a G. So we can go G, G sharp, A sharp, B. Now we get to the 4th this time, because we have a tuning change between the 2nd and 3rd string. It's a tuning change. If you look at this from string 6 going down, these are 4ths of each other. These are tuned a 4th apart, going down the neck. But when we get here, it's tuned a major 3rd apart. So when we get to our 4th here, that's going to be B, which happens to be our 2nd open string. So we got B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, back up to the 5th, because we only have the tuning change between 2nd and 3rd strings. And this will get talked about more in subsequent videos. So when we get to this E, which just happens to be this string here also, the 1st string. So now we have E, E sharp. Well, there's not an E sharp. Well, actually there is. If you watch my video on keys, and this is how I get you to make sure you're watching, if you watch my videos on key signatures, you can have an E sharp, which would be an F natural. Now, generally, we are not going to call anything an F sharp. an E sharp. Or generally, we're not going to call anything a C flat. The only time I see things like that, and like I said in the video, is in classical music. You don't see it in modern music, especially modern pop, modern rock music. You don't see that. So, but I wanted to throw that in there to see if you're paying attention. So we go back to our E. We have an E here. So we got E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. Basically, you're moving up the 12 steps of the major scale, which are 12 semitones, to get from 1 to 8, which would be an octave. If we're playing an A here, and we play an A here, that is 1 octave. That is 8 steps up, you can look at it that way, or 12 semitones to get back to that position. Well, what is a semitone? A semitone is a half-step movement. Everything we just did here was in semitones. those are all semitones. If we were going to do this by the major scale, and we were going to do this in the key of C, even though we're not starting on C, if we're going to do this on the key of C and we were playing the major scale, we followed the major pattern, then you would incorporate a lot of whole steps. Which would be the major scale in the key of C, even though we started that on F. So, but what we were doing was all semitones. There's 12 semitones between the octaves, which in an octave would be, you have, in speaking of intervals, you have intervals 1 through 7. When you get to the 8th interval, you're at an octave of the root. So if our root's 8, when we get to number 7, and then we go from 7 to 8, that is our octave, and that is A again. And again, it is important to know these things because this is really going to help us start understanding guitar and how all these notes start to relate to each other. And if you haven't watched my video on intervals, you need to watch that. I'm going to cover that more because intervals are so important to get into. And I said this in the previous video when I was talking about intervals. Even though the notes of a chord will change, the interval never will. If you're playing a root third and fifth, a root major third and a major fifth, it doesn't matter what chord you play, it's always going to be a root major third, major fifth. Always going to be. Now, are there variations? Yeah, because if we play a minor chord, now we're playing a root, a minor third, and a fifth. But all minor chords, all minor triads are always going to be root, minor third, fifth. Always. It doesn't matter the notes. The intervals never change for the same type of structure. Minor to minor, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be the same interval, but the notes themselves will change depending on the chord you're playing. So if we're playing we'll go back here to our A major, our root third fifth. This is 1, this is third, this is fifth. Okay, we got A, C, E. Oh, I'm sorry, A, C sharp, E. Well, if we take this to a G major, now we have G, B, D. But it's still a root third fifth. Root third fifth. A, C, E. Root third fifth. G, B, D. And that's what I was saying. The notes will change, but the intervals never will change. And this is something that you must understand. This is one of these must-learn things. You can't get through being a musician without this knowledge. And that's what's going to happen a lot on this side of the channel, is this is going to really start to dig into the theory and the understanding. It's not going to always be this. A lot of it's going to be this. Because guess what? It doesn't matter how good this is. If this isn't working, you're going nowhere. You're going nowhere. The difference between being a guitar player and a musician is a musician understands what they're doing. A guitar player, they just get on there and just play things. A guitarist knows why he's playing it. And that's what we're working on here today, being guitarist, understanding why we're playing it. So again, let's recap this. If we take an A major, which is A, C sharp, E, and we take a G major, which is G, B, D, it's still root third fifth. Root, third, fifth. Root, third, fifth. The interval doesn't change. The difference between A and C sharp in a major scale is always going to be a 1-3 relation. The difference between the C sharp and the E is always going to be a 3-5 relation. Well, the same goes to G. The difference between G and B is always going to be a 1-3 relation. The difference between B and D, is always going to be a 1-5 relation. The interval does not change. That is extremely important. So why are intervals so important? Like I said, I'm going to cover this quite a bit more in other videos. Why are intervals so important? Why don't I just need to know the notes? Because a lot of times when you're in a band, you're going to be playing and you're going to say it's in the key of, we'll say the key of C, and it's a 1-4-5 progression. What do you do? Well, if you know the theory, you can say, okay, C, D, E, F. All right, I got C, I got F, F major, I got G major. So I got this. Which has been covered in 19 billion of the world's most boring country music ever. But it's not that I'm hating on country music. I'm just not a big fan of the new country. The old country is pretty cool. The new country, this bro country, not a fan. But that's a 1-4-5 progression, all right? Because we're playing the root, the tonic, which is the C. Our 4 chord, the 4th interval of C is F major, because in a major scale, the 4th chord is a major chord. Then we got the 5 chord, which is a G major. So we got a 1, 4, 5. And it sounds 1-4-5, and it sounds happy because everything's major. Everything sounds happy because it's all major in a 1-4-5 progression, which works very well for country and a lot of poppy music that you want to make sound happy. Okay, so what if we're doing the key of G? And they say play a 1-4-5 progression. Okay, so we got G, A, B, C. We got G, C, D. 1-4-5 progression. And in the key of G, if you watch my other videos on keys, you know that the key of G has an F sharp. So the D will have a sharp third, which would be the F sharp. So if we play a G, play the 4, a C, play the 5, a D. Take a listen for a minute. That's the key of G, 1-4-5. Now let's do it in the key of C. All right. They sound close to similar, but not exactly the same. So let's change how we play it and listen to it. So now if we go back to our key of G, sorry, I'm pressing a little too hard, so it's pulling my strings a little sharp. Now we do the same thing, but do it in the key of C, and I'm going to change how I play it. So listen. Back to G. Okay, if you notice, they do sound different because we're using different chords. But if you notice if you're listening to it through intervals, they sound exactly the same. They're all major chords and they're all 1-4-5s. The progressions are identical. We're using different chords because we're in different keys. But the progression, the step between the chords is exactly the same. So with that knowledge, if you're like, well, I can't sing it in the key of C, let's move it to the key of G. All you have to do is play the 1-4-5 in the key of G, and all you've done is move the key to maybe a more appropriate key for you to sing in. And instead of having to know, oh my God, G, A, B, C, D, F, G, da, da, if you know the intervals of the scales, and I say we're in the key of C, we're playing a 1-4-5. Well, I can't sing that, it's too high. Okay, let's go to the key of G. You just simply play a 1-4-5 in the key of G. You're playing the same exact progression. The only thing that's going to change is where you sing the line vocally. Are you singing it up here? Or now are you singing it down here in your vocal range? And all you've changed is the key, but the progression is exactly the same. And I know this is a lot to take in, and I will go over this and over this and over this as this moves on. But these are very important, critical things for you to understand. Now, when I'm teaching a person one-on-one, face-to-face, I don't cover this much material. Because if I did, I would constantly have to go back and revisit it when the lessons every time that a student came over. The beauty of this is you can go back and watch this anytime that you want. As long as you're a member, you can go back and watch it 1,000 times to understand what we're talking about. And as we keep moving through the videos, things will start to unfold. And I promise you, this is what I tell my students, or I tell their parents when they come over and say, hey, can you teach my kid guitar or piano? I tell them all the same thing. Start cheap with instruments, but be prepared to invest. If they make it 3 months, they will be a guitar player or a piano player. Out of all the kids I've taught and adults, I'm going to say 50% of them don't make it 3 months. It's literally a 50% ratio. Because either they will quit on their own because they don't have interest, or I will recommend to the parent, you know what, this isn't for little Johnny. Because I can tell if he's putting in any time by the time he comes back here. And I don't want to waste my time, and I don't want to waste the parents' time or their money. If the kid's simply not picking it up, then I'm just going to drop the student. It's not that I'm being a jerk, but the kid, if he's not showing any interest, why would I continue to try to pound something into his head? But the ones who make it 3 months, those are the ones who become amazing musicians, amazing guitar players. Because when I teach live, I teach the theory also. I just don't sit you down like you do at so many stores. And this is a G chord, this is a C chord. Now let's learn how to play Hotel California. That's not how it works. We're going to learn music, but that's not around the corner. That's a little ways down because there's so much information we got to get in. And we'll start learning music like I do with my students just to keep it fun so they can hear something happening. Because normally what I'll do is I'll say, hey, pick a song. We will start working on that song while we're doing all this, as long as they don't pick something absolutely insane like Mr. Crowley by Ozzy Osbourne and Randy Rhoads. Not going to happen as a beginner. But these are the foundations, and these are incredibly important for you to understand. So one more time, you have to understand the intervals. Because like what I just said, if you're playing in the key of C and vocally it's too high, well, what if the guitar player says, all right, let's do it in the key of G? You don't have to ask him chords. You don't have to ask him anything because you're playing a 1-4-5 progression. And you know if you're playing in a major scale that the 1-4-5 are all major chords. So you're halfway through the battle, and it keeps people from thinking you're a musical moron. There's nothing worse than when you're playing with somebody and you say, hey, we're going to change the key in this to the key of C, but we're going to keep it in the 1-4-5, and they go, what are the chords? That's when it's time to get that person out of the band. You don't want to be that guy. You do not want to be that guy. So we're going to hammer on this side of it. We're going to talk about theory on the YouTube channel, but we're going to hammer theory on this side. This side is going to be, like I said, a much deeper dive, but it's going to be a lot more of the boring stuff. But it's the boring stuff that you learn now that makes you a great guitar player later. And like I said, the ones who make it 3 months, the ones who suffer through all the theory and all the sleepiness, those are the ones that you're going to see on stage in 15 years in some band thinking, damn, that guy's a good guitar player. Those are the ones who make it. So I'm going to wrap this one up right there. I'm going to keep this one a little short. I just wanted to delve a little deeper into the chords and why they are what they are. And so just stay tuned. Like I said, a lot of these videos, real quick, part 1s may be on my YouTube channel. Part 2 will be on my my Patreon or my YouTube subscribe, my YouTube join channel. But there will also be some that never make it to the YouTube channel. If it's something that I got to put a tremendous amount of work in and I really got to dive deep into it, it will probably go straight onto my join channel where you will be at anyway, so you'll get to see it. So I'm going to wrap that one up right there. And remember, you have to practice. In order to make this work, you have to practice. And I don't mean once a week. The best thing to do is jump in 30 minutes a day, at least 4 days a week. At least 4 days a week. That's the minimum you're going to be able to put into this to make this work. The more you put into it, I promise, the more you're going to get out of this. So keep all that in mind when you're practicing. So we're going to wrap this one up right there. And like I close down every single one of my YouTube channels, like the great Sammy Harris says, if you miss the beat, you lose the rhythm and nothing falls into place. So until our next video, practice, think about that theory. That's what makes you a great guitar player, and rock on.